This video is sponsored by Deckshell. There are lots of hot topics in the world of cycling right now, none more so than the number of chainrings on your bike. It used to be 3, then it became 2, and now 1 is very popular. But is 1 by the group set for you? Well, in this video, I'll share the reasons I like 1 by based on many years of testing bikes with different group sets on, and dispel some myths like speed, cadence, range, and gaps. So I'm certainly not here to sell you 1 by. I don't work for the manufacturers. It's based on my personal experience and why I like 1 by. And some of these reasons might work for you, but I'm not saying 1 by is for everybody. It clearly isn't. But there are many reasons, many cases where 1 by can work really well and offer certain benefits, which I'll cover in this video. I'm also not worried about the pros, what the pros need or what the pros want, because I'm not a pro. You're not a pro. I'm riding at normal speeds in normal real world situations without support cars and closed roads. So what the pros need and want is something else. I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on what we all need for riding in the real world, which at the moment is covered in snow here in the Cotswolds. So let's dive in. The question I get asked the most probably is it fast enough? And I think this stems from the fact that people are worried that the smaller single chainring on the front is going to limit your potential speed at the higher end and on descent. But let me tell you that is rarely the case, and there's no shortage of top end speed with a setup like this. So on this bike, I can easily do 35 kilometers per hour with 4 sprockets remaining. And in theory, this 3892 sprocket top gear will take you up to 70 kilometers per hour. For comparison, a 5211 setup, which is quite common, will take you up to 78 kilometers per hour. So not much in it. When you get up to that sort of heady speed, which is going to be on a mountain descent, let's face it, you're far better off going into an aero tuck to try and minimize your drag than trying to spin out at 70 plus kilometers per hour, which will require a crazy cadence. So I think that easily dispels the myth that a 1 by setup will hold you back at the top end. Unless you're the sort of rider who spends your whole time smashing around in a 5311. And if that's you and you don't have a pro contract, then hello, what are you playing at? So the lack of speed is not an issue with 1 by. You can easily go to a bigger chainring on a setup if you do want more top end speed. But as I said, I can do 35, 37 kilometers per hour and still have 4 sprockets remaining free. So there's no worry that I can't go as fast as my energy, my legs, my talent will take me on a setup like this. So the gears are not the thing holding me back at top end. It's my lack of fitness more often than not. The other big question that people have about 1 by and whether it's suitable for them is the gear range. Now, bicycle drivetrains have come a long way in the last 100 years. Go back 20 years and 5 or 6 sprockets on the back was standard, and that's why a double or even a triple was needed to increase the range of gears. But now we have 11, 12 and even 13 sprockets on a cassette. So the need for a double or triple is much less than it used to be. And a 1 by setup now with 12 or 13 sprockets, as is the case here, gives you all the range you get from a conventional 2 by setup, and in some cases much more. That SRAM Eagle 1050 or 1052 setup, borrowed from the mountain bike that you can use on a gravel bike, video linked above if you missed that, gives you massive range, more range than you can ever need. And I've used that setup in the Italian mountains, and let me tell you, I had no problems getting up the steepest climbs or bombing down the fastest descents on the other side. So range isn't the issue. You can clearly get a big range with the modern 1 by drivetrain we're seeing now, borrowing all that mountain bike technology that we're seeing. So range really isn't an issue with 1 by, and in fact it's a clear benefit of 1 by in many cases, because you can get a bigger range 1 by than many 2 by setups. This is probably the crux of the issue, and one of the negatives that people commonly point out as a reason not to adopt a 1 by is the gaps between the sprockets on the cassette. And if you are obsessed about being the perfect optimum cadence at all times, then 1 by probably won't be for you. But I'm fairly confident that the number of people obsessed about being the perfect cadence at all times are probably very small. And most people will ride at a wide range of cadences and can work around some of the inherent compromises with a 1 by, which are getting much less with the advent of 12 and now 13 speed cassettes like we have here. I think part of the problem is a visual one. Cassettes on one-by gravel and mountain bikes are massive compared to road bike cassettes, but it's worth looking more closely at how road bike cassettes have evolved. So way back in the day, an 1121 corn cob cassette was fairly standard, and an 1125 would be a climbing gear. But a modern road bike group set like Durace, for example, has an 1130, which is simply massive compared to what we had back in the day. And the 1132 and the 1134 are fairly common on lower end or endurance bikes. And if you look at 1132, for example, the gaps are fairly sizable in some places. And my experience based on riding road and off-road bikes with 2x and 1x over the last 15 years is that the steps or the gaps are rarely the issue that many people make them out to be. Now, admittedly, a big cassette like SRAM's 1050, which you get on many mountain bikes, and now a gravel bike if you want it, does have some quite large gaps at the business end of the cassette, which can be an issue sometime, but with an emphasis on sometimes. Most of the time, it's not a problem. It's much less of a problem riding off-road than it is on a road. The only time I've really found the one-by gap to be a slight problem were on a road bike on a fast group ride when the pace was being set by somebody else, so I wasn't in control of how fast I wanted to go, and it was usually too fast for my taste. But the number of times I was in the wrong gear were minimised by the fact that you're changing gears quite a lot on a group ride, especially here in the Cotswolds with quite undulating terrain. It's never flat for long, you're going up and down, so you're constantly changing gear. So the percentage of that ride that I spent in the not quite perfect gear was very small, and most of the time it wasn't an issue. Now, the issue of cadence is an interesting one, and I looked through some old Strava data and pegged out one typical ride of about 3 hours with some hills and flat roads, and my average cadence as an RPM or revolutions per minute was 88 for the entire ride, and I maxed out at 117. But there are large periods where my sweet spot was between 90 and 100. So that's a fairly small band from 90 up to 117, with 90 to 100 being the biggest average. So 10 revolutions per minute between the minimum and maximum, and that's my sweet spot. I'm not sure how many people have a similar experience with their cadence, whether higher or lower. I'd love to know your thoughts on this topic down below, whether you go for bigger gears all the time or lower gears. Do you spin to win, or do you grind to whatever grinding gets you? Bad knees usually. So it's an interesting topic. And like I said, if you're obsessed about being that perfect cadence all the time, one by might not be for you. Another absolute hot potato of a topic is cross chaining. And some cyclists lose their absolute mind over cross chaining. So it's a bad thing, should avoid it at all costs, your life depends on it. But is it really that bad? Well, no, it's not really that big a problem in my experience. Yes, there might be more stress and strain on the chain at certain angles, but in my experience, it's impossible to detect whether the chain is wearing out faster on a 1x versus a 2x. The differences are so small. But what about efficiency? Surely cross-chaining is less efficient than the perfect chain line at all times. Well, one study I found showed that cross-chaining made no measurable impact on the efficiency of the drivetrain in total. And the other factor to bear in mind, that the number of times, the amount of time you spend cross-chaining is very small. Now, of course, you can make the argument that a perfectly straight chain line can be the best for efficiency at all times. But even on a 2x or 3x, you're not going to be in that perfect straight chain line at all times unless you're riding one sprocket on a cassette at all times. So there will be some degree of angulation even on a 2x or 3x. Just on a 1x, it might be more extreme, but you're not riding in those extreme gears at all times. You spend most of your time, in my experience, in the middle range of the cassette, only using those bigger sprockets or smaller sprockets for a shorter amount of time. So the cross-chaining isn't really a factor. And I know lots of people make it out to be a big problem, but it really isn't a big problem. And I've been riding 1x, 2x, 3x bikes for most of my life, and I've never had any issues from cross-chaining, whether it's efficiency concerns or the chain and sprockets wearing out more quickly. So I think we can put that one to bed as not being a big issue that many people make it out to be. Maybe in the pro ranks where a few watts can make a difference, yes. But as I said, for normal riders like you and I, it's not really an issue. I also think 1x looks much better as well. It's clean, it's simple, it's uncluttered. Now personally, I don't think derailleurs or mechanisms look that nice at all, even when they're wrapped up with carbon fibre and other exotic materials. So having one less mechanism is one less ugly thing hanging off the frame, attached to the frame. So it looks clean, looks modern, looks uncluttered, unfussy, and I like that. Now in an ideal world, I'd love all the gear mechanisms to be hidden away from sight, so in the frame, bottom bracket or rear hub even, but we're a long way from that happening. But this is a step in the right direction and definitely looks much better to me. There's also frame design benefits by removing the front mech, which we can see very well on this 3T Explorer Race Max. You can redesign this area to be more optimal in terms of stiffness, weight, and also aerodynamics. We've seen that on the 3T Strada and the Vielo, which I reviewed, linked above if you missed that. And we're seeing them redesign this area in a way you can't when you have to accommodate the front mech. Now, of course, those aero gains or stiffness gains are subjective, of course. You can believe or not believe their claims around improvements like getting rid of the front mech allows in this area, but it's definitely something that will be exploited further going forward. And the other factor, especially important on a gravel bike like this, where tyre clearance is everything, is that you can increase the tyre clearance, keep the chainstays short, and also keep the Q factor, the distance between the pedals, nice and narrow like you get on a road bike, rather than the wider stance you get on a mountain bike. So getting rid of the front mech has clear frame design benefits, and I'm sure we'll see much more in this area development in the future. I find 1x drivetrains much quieter than 2x or 3x as well. These modern group sets have a clutch mechanism in the back which stops the chain slapping on the derailleur there, so much higher tension, and that over rough ground or pavé makes the bike much quieter and protects the frame from damage as well. You also don't have the front mech rubbing on the chain in those extreme chain angles as well, so you have much less noise. So unless you like a noisy bike, 1x is definitely a quieter setup. So those are my reasons for really liking 1x and why it works for me. Now, I'm not here to try and pull the wool over your eyes or convince you to buy a 1x. I'm not in the pocket of the industry selling 1x group sets. This is my honest, unbiased opinion based on years and years of testing different types of bikes with different group sets, and how I come to really enjoy the benefits of 1x and why it works for the riding I do here in the real world, which is very snowy today, it has to be said. So I know it won't be for everybody, but for lots of people I think 1x works really well. And I want to dispel some of the myths. I see lots of comments online, people saying this and that about 1x and why it doesn't work, of people who clearly haven't tried it. Now, the biggest takeaway from the video is to give it a go. If you have the opportunity to try 1x, try it, and then decide whether it's for you or not. I've had the opportunity to try 1x on many, many bikes, which I know I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to do. So if you can try it, it might open your eyes. And I know it won't be for everybody, but I think lots of people can benefit from 1x in a way that I benefited in the last few years. And I think there's definitely more room for improvement. 13 goes a long way to improving it. This really smart cassette design on this Eccar group set works really well. Link to my review of that group set above if you missed it. And just to reiterate, I'm not worried about what the pros need or want. We've seen some well publicised issues with 1x in the pro peloton, but I don't give a toss what the pros need or want, to be honest. I'm a normal rider like you, riding normal roads without support cars or closed roads. And here, in the real world, 1x works really well. Anyway, those are my thoughts on 1x. I want to share them with you, get your thoughts on them. As I said, I'm not trying to force it down your throat. I know it won't be for everybody, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on 1x. Whether you've made the leap to 1x, have you enjoyed it, or have you gone back to 2x and it's not worked for you? Let me know what you think down below. I'd love to know your thoughts on this very interesting topic in the world of cycling at the moment. Anyway, that's all for now. Make sure you like this video, enjoy watching it, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll leave you with my sponsored message for this video. This video has been sponsored by Deckshell, a manufacturer of a wide range of waterproof gloves, socks, hats, and other accessories to keep you warm and dry, whether it's snowing outside or it's pouring down with rain. So check out their full range at their website, linked down below.